Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And it's been a long time, too long since covering the region of Eastern Europe. So, in our all things Romania and possibly all things Eastern European affairs, we welcome back our returning champion, Dr. Maria Cernat. She's an academic who specializes in media studies, ethics in media. She was a leading contributor to the Barricade, a pan-Eastern European left-wing news outlet. But now she continues to be an independent journalist with Pacifica Barricada. She's a member of the Romanian chapter of World Beyond War, and she's also a journalism and media critics instructor at Tito Maesc in Romania. And so here it goes. So, firstly, Maria, welcome back to One Plus One.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's an honor to have you back. And just before we get into our conversation, please, folks, donate to One Plus One. Share us widely across social media. It's our only way to overcome the far right algorithms and the very strong pro-war, pro-sexist, racist, queer bashing, and Zionist avalanche that people are spoon fed to, and the monopoly that corporate media has. So again, please share widely One Plus One. And sometimes Facebook does block me from sharing widely. So again, folks, please share widely my work. And now on to the topic at hand. Actually, so Maria, before I ask you specifically about what's going on in Romania and what happened since the last general election, first of all, talk to us because I find I love the fact that you're part of the Romanian chapter of World Beyond War, and you're now also doing your own independent media project, Pacifica Barricade. Tell us about tell us what you've been doing with the Romanian chapter of World Beyond War and some of the anti war demonstrations and peace projects that you're part of. I'm very curious.
When the war in Ukraine started, I realized that there were two types of commentators. There were those who hated Russia more than they hated war, and there were those who hated the United States more than they hated war. And while I found very interesting political commentators and fellow journalists and comrades in the camp that criticized the West and NATO, they hated NATO and the United States more than they hated war. They were commenting from a position that was clearly pro-Russian and discussing the tragic conflict in Ukraine like it was a football game, and they were happy that the Russians were winning. Now, I decided back then that that was no longer a place for me to be in and that I have to align myself with an organization that actively promotes peace, and that organization is World Beyond War. It has chapters in hundreds of countries. It was founded by two Americans in the United States, and you can look it up online. I will give you the link for the description.
David Swanson, Greta Zarro, and Rachel Smalls have all been regular champions on this show. So,
Okay, so you probably are familiar with the organization, and I'm alongside with another activist, long-standing ecologist and pro-peace activist Hans Hedrich, who is Romanian-born German ethnic, and we are the two coordinators of the Romanian chapter. And we organized what I think it was the first protest against NATO organized at Cogălnicianu. We have a military base, a huge military base at Cogălnicianu. And we were the first to organize a protest there, a pacifist protest. Now, the pacifist barricade or the peace barricade is a media outlet that aims to promote the actions of the Romanian chapter of World Beyond War. It is the media, if you like, associated with World Beyond War Romania. And we do our best to promote the message of peace. We also organized, just before the war in Iran started, we organized the peace caravan where we went to the US Embassy, we went to the Israeli Embassy, we went to the Russian Embassy and to the EU Commission representatives here in Romania, and we demanded that they promote peace and that they obey the UN Charter saying that there has to be a peaceful resolution of conflicts. And I'm very happy that finally in Romania we have a pro-peace movement. It started off with the pro-Palestine youth movement that was very active. But now it is true that it is more timid and it is less popular than the pro-Palestine movement, but the pro-peace movement is getting traction also in Romania. It is not as popular as other pro-peace movements are in other countries, but it's starting to become more and more important, and I'm very happy to play a part in this.
Can I ask a follow-up question, if I may? So I want,
Please.
yeah. So I wanted to ask, I, yeah, no, no. So I just wanted to ask because, uh, I mean, yeah, I wanted to ask, when the genocide, when Israel's genocidal onslaught happened, still is happening in Gaza, in Romania, where a lot of the Romanian students and just in general Romanians also protesting against what Israel was doing, and it just wasn't being covered as much as when big demonstrations happen in Western Europe, like Germany, Holland, France, Britain, and so forth. And then another quick question is what is the state of of people who 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 even if they are pro NATO, they want to see an end to the ongoing war between the ongoing proxy war between NATO and Russia, Russia vice versa in Ukraine. I'm very curious your response to both of those questions.
Yes, it was a student encampment in Romania. I think it was organized 2 years ago when students started protesting, and there were several protests organized by a pro-Palestinian student organization. And they are very active online, and I was very happy to see that. They were more reluctant to be anti-NATO at first,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
given the fact that their political involvement was mainly due to their exposure to horrific videos that they saw via the Instagram. And they were very young, and probably they were not aware of all the implications this participation in the NATO alliance for Romania has. I'm pretty sure maybe most of them weren't even born in 1999 when Romania offered the United States NATO, and the United States basically the possibility to use our space for the bombardments, the aerial space for the bombardment of Serbia. So I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure they were not aware of all the implications because they were not old enough. But and also when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Iran, it's very difficult to have a pro-peace stance. Well, not so difficult if you know a little bit of history, but at the first glance, it seems like you are supporting dictatorships, you are supporting extremely authoritarian leaders and regimes, and you are pro-theocracy and so on and so forth. While in fact, you are supporting each and every one the right to live and the idea that you cannot bring progress through bombs and tanks and rockets and death and destruction to anyone. So if you really care about what's going on in Russia and Iran, the idea to start wars or to continue wars or to, you know, make everything to participate in the ongoing effort to amplify these conflicts instead of stopping the conflicts. This is the right solution. But this is a position that even in leftist groups in Romania, very few people arrive to because of the controversial nature, let's face it, of the authoritarian leaderships in countries like Russia or Iran. And it is also this missionary complex. Even though we are such a poor and small country, we tend to align with those who sell us the narrative that a military intervention such the one in Iran will bring progress, will give people the opportunity to overthrow this very unjust and unruling and authoritarian and cruel Islamic regime. Well, I told you, in fact, none of this is true. None of this is true for the simple reason that while everything you may say about this form of government that they have in Iran might be true, it is their should I say, they are the ones who should overthrow it, not, and the idea that you can bomb feminism, that you can bomb progressive thinking in a country like Iran, and by destroying the country and throwing it back decades, if not maybe centuries ago, if you carpet bomb the country, how is this going to help those people? So this missionary, this complex has
Yeah.
to disappear, and I think it's slowly disappear. And I think we are able to see through the cynical intentions of Israel and the United States, and more people are waking up. And let me tell you that we had just the other day a vote in the Romanian parliament, unfortunately, that granted the US access to the Cogălnicianu military base that is going to be used directly in the war against Iran. It is not used for offensive purposes for all I know, but they said they are going to use it for defensive purposes like refueling and replenishing their military supplies and so on and so forth. But the interesting thing here is that the resolution that was voted in the parliament was secret. So it was a resolution that was first discussed in the Superior Council of National Defense, and it was discussed there by the representatives that usually take part in this security administration organization that is led by the Romanian president. And then the resolution that was secret and a document that was secret was voted by the parliament, which in itself is bizarre, because if you have a vote in the parliament, now what are you going to, you have to, if it's public and if it's debatable, it cannot be secret. But they said, they said that the military base is going to be used for defensive purposes. Now, how are we going to explain this? I don't know, because it seems so absurd that you engage directly against a country that was not bombing, that was not attacking anyone, and you start bombing the country, and then you say that you are going to use this military base for defensive. It beats me. I don't understand. I don't
Well,
claim
there's the
to do. It
rockets.
seems a little bit illogical,
Well,
but
that's well.
there you.
Well, war is a racket, and as as Vladimir Lenin says, I know he's Satan incarnate in Eastern Europe. But Lenin did say imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism, and these are the contradictions. So on the one hand, you want to spread the free market all over the world. On the other hand, doing it through militarism seems counterproductive, but this is what it is. This is what the market wants. But it's such a racket in the end. And one of these days, in fact, I should have you on the show with a mutual Italian comrade of ours. We should and analyze how international affairs, if you really look at how America conducts itself, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Canadian Empire, it's almost like a mafia. It really is just organized crime on a massive scale, and it's a racket. It really is a racket. But interesting to know that there is an anti-war movement and the peace movement happening in Romania, and that's great news. So that's great. So on to Romanian affairs. The last time I had you on, wow, Romania was going through a roller coaster. I still believe Romania is still going through a roller coaster. So my first question is this: is explain to us, those who don't follow Eastern European affairs very closely, what happened last general election in Romania, where to the total surprise of everyone and anyone, the surprise front runner was this guy, Calin Georgescu, an independent who was later barred by the Romanian deep state and the elections committee for being what they claim that he was a Russian puppet and so forth. I think it is safe to say that he is very far right, very fiscally conservative and socially very regressive. So all that being said, who governs Romania right now? What happened to Georgescu? And because I believe he was under investigation for being a Russian puppet and for dodgy election money stuff. So what's going on with him right now, and what is his move and what is his movement? What does the movement that he represents? Who do they support right now? Since he is being subjected, whether we like him or not, but he is being subjected to what our friends in Latin America called lawfare. So yeah, your response to all of that. Oh, you're muted, Maria.
Yes, let me unmute myself. So, what happened on December 6th was that after the second round of presidential elections was validated by the Romanian Electoral Authority, this national, how should I translate it? The Superior Council of National Defense, this organization that I talked to you about, received reports from the Romanian intelligence service. So from the secret services, they received a report claiming that there was an alleged foreign interference, especially a Russian influence in the electoral process. And based on secret reports offered by the Romanian intelligence service, the elections were banned by the Romanian High Court. Then there were also complaints against Georgescu for violations of campaign finance regulations. Now, charges were brought against him, but to no fruition due to the fact that there is this very gray area in Romanian legislation, electoral legislation. There is the so-called pre-campaign period when all people and all political parties invest huge amounts of money and they promote themselves. Now, the law clearly states that once the election cycle is announced, the calendar is announced, then you are only able to promote yourself as a political candidate and your political ideas only in a certain period that is specified in the calendar. But there is this gray area that all parties use, all political candidates, the so-called pre-campaign. And they claim that if the law states that if you are not barred from promoting yourself and conducting electoral persuasion, then you are allowed. But this is a very controversial and almost illegal interpretation of this particular regulation in the Romanian law. And this is why Georgescu convinced a lot of influencers before to promote him. He promoted himself in this gray area, this period where it's very difficult to bring charges against the candidates because everybody used this loophole and this alleged loophole in the legislation. And basically, a lot of people made money because promoting Georgescu meant also promoting themselves, and they created this media frenzy around Georgescu, and he was able to win the electorate. Now, what is even more interesting here is that the alleged Russian interference was the National Liberal Party interference. Because let me quote you for
let me just interject. Let me just interject very quickly. The National Liberal Party is a socially and fiscally conservative, right-wing, right-leaning party. They have been in power. They were in power under a Klaus Johannes for a period of time, and to give people an idea of how right-wing, far-right they are, they're members of the European People's Party group, Parliament group in the EU, where all of the center-right and far-right work together, and they are members of both the International Democracy Union and the centrist Democrats International, which is where all the Christian right-wing groups, all of the right-wing groups you can imagine, from Republicans to the Conservatives to the National Party to the Liberal Party of Australia, this is where all of the basket of deplorables get together and talk about how they can advance a right-wing world and help one another out. So, yeah.
Yes, the National Liberals were the ones that tried. I mean, this is the critics of those who canceled the elections. This is why they say, because they suspect that it was the National Liberals that supported Georgescu in order to defeat the Social Democrats, even though the National Liberals and the Social Democrats were in this very bizarre, oxymoronic, if you like, coalition of government in Romania, because you have socialists alongside with the National Liberals, and it was so absurd. But nevertheless, they functioned as a coalition, and then they decided to each and everyone to propose their own candidate. And they decided to play this very dirty game, and it was a Snoop. The Snoop is called a media platform, a media outlet that published a very, very interesting investigation that I think is crucial for the understanding of what really was going on. Because I tend to believe that this was an inside job that was instrumentalized by the National Liberals that tried to give Călin Georgescu just enough votes so that the more socially conservative electorate would not vote for the Social Democrats. And let me quote you from the article that was published just a few just after the elections were cancelled. Snoop has learned that the National Agency for Fiscal Administration recently discovered that the Balance and Verticality campaign on TikTok was paid with funds from the National Liberal Party. Now, this Balance and Verticality campaign was a campaign for Călin Georgescu. The information was confirmed to Snoop through discussions and correspondence with the company hired by the National Liberals, Kensington Communication, which designed the campaign. The company paid 130 influencers recruited through FameUp platform, but states that the form generated by Kensington Communication underwent some modifications that do not belong to our team, nor are we aware that they were requested by representatives of the party. Kensington said that the hashtag originally chosen for our company was later changed on the FameUp. So they basically claim that it was not their doing, even though it was very slightly changed, this campaign that was paid by the National Liberals. The campaign gathered 2.4 million views, where influencers described Călin Georgescu using a copy-paste script without naming him directly, but using the same characterizations he uses about himself, according to Expert Forum. In addition, a Snoop analysis conducted a brief sent to a newsroom by a company hired by the Liberals showed that the influencers followed pre-established instructions from the National Liberals. And it's a very good investigation. I urge the viewers to read it, to use the AI to translate it. I think we should give the link in the description, because I think this is a very important piece of journalistic investigation that is showing how this campaign that was organized for Călin Georgescu was also paid by the National Liberals. And now also the decision that was made to ban the elections was based on secret documents provided by the secret services, and to this day it is not clear who paid how much money, who got what from Russians, and the connection with Russia was difficult to establish, even though there are speculations, and it seems like they would have liked Călin Georgescu to be their guy. But let me tell you that my intuition was correct, because I remember conducting an interview with Scott Ritter, and he was like, "Oh, Romanians, are you that naive? Why don't," and he uses harsher words, "and why don't you vote for Călin Georgescu because he promises peace," and so on and so forth. But Călin Georgescu proved to be just a pro-Trump supporter, and unfortunately it was just another hope of Romanians that went to the historical trash bin, because as Donald Trump eroded himself due to the fact that he was not helping Romanians, and the ones who were hoping that the United States will take a harsher stance against the fact that elections were banned in Romania and would say more and probably do more. And as Donald Trump tarnished his reputation, also the reputation of Călin Georgescu, who was a supporter of Trump, was also tarnished. And let me tell you that also the Alliance for the Union of Romanians, who claimed to be against the war, when the resolution was voted to allow the US to use the Cogan-Liceanu military base, they abstained. They didn't have the guts to vote against. And let me tell you that George Simeon, who's the leader of this alliance, went to Israel. And let me tell you that also Călin Georgescu is pro-Israel. So they do not dare, unfortunately, to go against Israeli politicians, okay? They do not dare to go against Netanyahu. And basically, you have a political force that was connected to Donald Trump, that is Călin Georgescu and the Alliance for the Union of Romanians. And now, as Donald Trump's reputation is eroded, also their reputation is eroded. And I feel vindicated, because my intuition, even back then, you remember that I said, well, these people are not to be trusted fully, because they may say now that Romania is investing too much in Ukraine, but when it comes to Israel, they were very obedient. And they claim to be part of this so-called sovereignist movement, But when you discuss sovereignty, you discuss independence, autonomy. What independence and on autonomy when you don't dare to go against these ready politicians, these ready rulers? What independence are we talking about here when you don't dare to go against Trump? And as Trump, is sinking, so they are also sinking. And now there is a major demand, if you like. There's a void in Romanian politics because everything is controlled. Now the country is ruled by a very funny character, Nick Jordan. Of course, he was promoted because he
And he's
won a competition in mathematics.
and he's also I mean this will surprise many people who follow Romanian politics, but there are multiple what can only be described as far right libertarian parties, correct?
Yes, and he's a member of a party that got like 10% of the votes, but unfortunately they have now, even though they got 10% of the votes, and a lot of people did not voted because they felt that they were not represented. So you have a representation around 5-6% of the total population, and yet this party has the crucial a crucial role in the government because the Minister of External Affairs, then you have the Minister of Defense. So two very important and key elements in the Romanian government are given to this party, and you have here representatives of this party dominating basically a government. Why do I say that? Because we live in a time where the Minister of External Affairs, the Minister of Defense, they play a crucial role because we are in a state of geopolitical unrest. And suddenly these ministers are very, very important. Maybe in peacetime they would not be so important, but now they play a crucial role. So even though they have, I mean, very little representation, and the unions for Save Romania, this is their political party, Union Save Romania, even though they are not liked, even though a lot of people resent them, they are very, very active online. They are very good at, using social media, and they are very active, but they do not, and they lack genuine political representation.
That's crazy. So all that being said, what can you say? What is the legacy of the now former Prime Minister of Romania, Klaus Johannes? And again, his party was the National Liberal Party, socially and fiscally conservative, right leaning party. How do you critically assess his time in office? And again, the NLP, they are members of the global soft to far right movement. They're members of the European People's Party group in the EU that tries to unite all the right wingers, even accommodating the far right. They are members of the International Democracy Union and even centrist Democrat International. And the IDU, I believe Stephen Harper, former Conservative Prime Minister of Canada, he's the head of this. Of this group, and one of the members, Brian Loughlin of the Liberal Party of Australia, basically that's Australia's equivalent of what the Republican Party and what the Conservative Party of England is in Australia. I mean, so very right. So just very right wing groups. But yeah, I'm curious. How do you assess his time in office? And then again, and then right now in Romania, so you have a very small far right party that's ruling, but isn't
It
Ceausescu.
is a coalition of parties with the
Oh,
National Liberals again and with the Social Democrats. Okay,
oh,
so
the
you
Social
have a
Democrats are in
very,
this coalition.
yes, the Social Democrats, and I think they are going to be very, very eroded by this experience because this coalition, I think, is one of the most unpopular in recent history because they cut the budget for the education, and I think we are the last in Europe in terms of investments in education. More than 10,000 teachers lost their jobs because they increased the workload for teachers. They also banned mothers and who just gave birth, women that just gave birth, no longer have access to medical insurance. They also are discussing, and I think it passed, the idea of giving up a tax of 1% on the turnover for corporations. So you take money from the educational system and from mothers and you give it basically to corporations. You cut taxes for corporations. Also, the first day of medical leave is no longer paid in Romania because this is what they decided, that the first day when you get sick, you're not paid.
Wow.
Also, they paid and they cut benefits for AIDS, for people with AIDS. And yeah, I mean, I think these are the harshest measures that were taken so far. And you are wondering why aren't people rebelling? And I think they are not rebelling due to the fact that the Romanian society is extremely polarized. And you still have this very small minority of individuals who blindly support what the government is doing because they are selling off this idea that we are doing all of these things because we have to survive. This is this austerity myth that Michael Blyth so brilliantly deconstructs. But unfortunately, this type of analysis hasn't reached Romania yet. And we are in this narrative where we have to cut everything and basically destroy the social welfare because in the final aftermath, we will be able to overcome this period of crisis. While in fact, by cutting off uh, people's salaries, you no longer have consumption, you no longer have a market, and basically the economy is stagnating and we are in full recession now. We are
But
in
uh,
full
but uh, but but
recession,
but but I have to ask.
and this
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to say that this Prime Minister Bolojan was also brought because he was the mayor of one of the cities in western part of Romania, Oradea, and he promoted himself like the one that is not afraid to cut costs in order to save, the city, the country, the planet, whatever. So he presented himself as this very serious individual that is not afraid to cut, the budget for the education for teachers and for the most vulnerable, parts of our society. And now he cut also the budget for superior education, and also the ones who had the PhD had a small, how should I say, benefit, financial incentive. I don't know how to call it. Um, they had some money. I mean, people who had their PhD
Yeah.
had this PhD bonus, okay, a salary bonus for holding a PhD, and now this is also cut. And I don't know what's next because honestly, um, I don't know if the economy is not working because, as Michael Blyth says, what works for you as a person, meaning that you have to cut costs and make sure you bring home more money in order to survive financially. If this works for you as an individual, this doesn't work for a society and for an economy. And when you apply this type of austerity measures, the result is always a catastrophe. And even though was proven time and again that this is not economically and financially feasible, governments use these moralizing arguments, trying to say, and they use this very intuitive idea that what may work for an individual also works for the whole economy, even though this is a fallacy, basically, composition fallacy. What is true for the
Yeah,
individual is not true
I
for
mean,
the whole.
sometimes when I hear my fiscally conservative, economically liberal friends when they talk about how about why they about how businesses should be free to do more of this, should businesses should be free to do more of that. I always think to myself, I don't like look, I'm not against McDonald's doing profits, but just because McDonald's is doing well, just because like H&M is doing well, doesn't mean that I'm doing well. Like why like but capitalist propaganda and so forth. People just constantly like repeat repeat things like stock market is doing well, which means everybody is doing well, and it's like okay, but
Yes, and now coming back to what's going on in Romania, unfortunately, it's a very controlled environment where a lot of people and unfortunately a lot of intellectuals that actually voted for Nicușor Dan are supporting this government. And let me tell you what the strategy was. The strategy in Romania, I think it was the first time, maybe it was also 2008, so almost 20 years. We used this strategy where you had to save with your vote your country for the bigger evil. So we always had not to vote the lesser evil, but we always had to vote between the angels and the demons. So this led to an increasingly polarized society because the electoral strategy was based on hate. There was actually a political slogan when the ex-president Klaus Iohannis was elected: hide your grandmother's ID card so that she can vote because she's stealing your future. So this intergenerational conflict was played, and the idea that the old people and the poor people and people living in rural areas are stupid. And of course, due to the fact that that was the electoral, if you like, ritual for the past 20 years, that we always had the demonization campaign, against Ponta, the demonization campaign against Viorica Dăncilă, the demonization campaign against, now you had AUR, the Alliance for the Union of Romanians. So you had all these demonization campaigns that instrumentalized the fears of one part of the society against the others. And this is how they ruled Romania. And so far, it seemed to be working. Now, there are cracks in that system because those who voted for Nicușor Dan, the current president of Romania, who comes from this minor party, the Union Save Romania, who has 10% of the votes, so irrelevant if you ask me.
they were also very they were like COVID denialists, right? Like COVID minimalists, like
No. These were COVID fanatics. The Alliance for the Union of Romanians were COVID denialists, but these were COVID fanatics, if you like me, were the other the other tribe. Okay, so the intellectuals who actually voted for this guy are now being directly hit by the fiscal and budgetary cuts. And we see that, and this is, I saw a statistic just to tell you how desperate situation in Romania is. I will give you just, because maybe it is not relevant to base your analysis on a single indicator, but I think it's important for the viewers to know that in the past 4 years, birth rate plummeted in Romania. They decreased by 25%. 25%. Okay? So this is the situation. It doesn't, I mean, it is not okay to base your analysis on a single indicator, but then again, when you have in such a short period of time such a dramatic decrease in birth rates, you can really tell there's something very wrong with that society. Something very wrong is going on. So that has to ring an alarm bell that, and unfortunately, the measures were what? To cut the medical insurance for the mothers for women who just gave birth. I mean,
So
what
so
is the
so
rationale
so
in this?
so
What is the rationale in this?
so safe to say that the legacy of Klaus Johannes and the National Liberal Party is yet another in a long line of just grotesque Romanian disaster, capitalism, grotesque austerity. That's a perfect segue to my third question, which is how are Romanians, the average working class, the precarious middle class, both of whom have a job, largely what we call in work poverty? And when Romanians are told that they need to spend not just 2% of Romania's GDP on NATO militarism, but a whopping 5%, are Romanians, even those foolish enough to lionize all things the EU and NATO, are they starting to turn against it? Because I saw on Euro News, which is very pro EU and very pro NATO, but I was watching a very short report on Euro News of teachers in Romania protesting the ridiculous low wages that universities and also elementary, middle school, and high school teachers get. So is there still the pro NATO view still widely held in Romania and across Eastern Europe, despite what a racket NATO is? I'm curious your response.
Well, yes, I think people are starting to wake up because now they see how expensive this type of belief is. For a long period of time, it didn't seem to be so expensive and so dangerous. But now you hear a lot of voices and a lot of people who are expecting a clear-cut protest against war and against the war of aggression against Iran and the war of aggression against um, this country who didn't attack anyone at the time it was attacked by Israel and the United States. And I think there is a growing discontent in Romanian society and no political representation. And my fear is that now we are at a very vulnerable stage because there was such an anti-communist, fanatic propaganda that unfortunately there isn't yet a left-wing force to galvanize all this discontent in the Romanian society. And my biggest fear is that an even more extremist political leader will manage to climb, and use this political discontent and for growing frustration, increasingly growing frustration of Romanians who see themselves fed this same lies that war is peace, weapons mean security. They are still afraid. They are still afraid of Russia. But increasingly, and I'm looking, for instance, my indicator is the following. You look at Radio Free Europe, who, by the way, announced that it will close its operation here in Romania. Very interesting. Why? Maybe because when you look at the comments, you see haha, meaning a lot of people started to laugh at them. So basically you have, let's say, 1,000 reactions, and out of the 1,000 reactions, you have like 6,000 laughs
Uh,
and 200 angry faces. So this means, and I think it's a clear indication that a lot of people are not buying this narrative that is being fed to us, this constant, fear mongering and the idea, oh, if you don't give us everything and if you don't sacrifice yourselves and the little income you have, then Russia's gonna come and eat you alive and so on and so forth. There is also growing frustration with the fact that the Ukrainians got a lot of help whereas Romanian children, and this also this interethnic, racism and xenophobia at hand, because this is what happens when people are materially deprived. Um,
Yep.
and when you don't have a leadership like you have in Spain, for instance, that had the guts to stand up and say no to Trump, no to NATO, it proves that it isn't impossible. And I think it's very important what Spain is doing also, because we have a huge community of Romanians who emigrated in
Yeah,
Spain.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And I see also people who used to be hardcore libertarians who worked, for instance, in advertising, but they decided to emigrate to Spain. And when they see what's going on there, then they start to change their minds and become, and this is important because they are opinion leaders, and a lot of people read them, and they are very talented, intelligent people, and it's very good that we have them. So we start to see cracks in the wall. It was for a very long time. I have to confess, it was an enormous personal discomfort to see what was going on, because there was no ray of hope. But now I see that people are spontaneously protesting against the U.S. use of Cogolnicianu military base. There are people who asked me to give a declaration about the stance of the pacifist barricade. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. First time something like that happens. I see people who are commenting. I see that thousands of people shared our post where the protest at Cogolnicianu military base. So I think we are beginning to see a shift in Romanians' perspectives on war. We are a very tolerant and unfortunately very obedient people, because I think should something like this happen,
Your
I
words,
don't
not
know,
mine.
in other countries, they would be protesting and screaming. But we are very patient and very, very depressed, I would say, because for the past 30 years, even Călin Georgescu, I mean, a lot of people looked at him like he was Jesus, because he also presented himself like he was Jesus. He presented himself, I told you that he was ridiculous. And I told you I felt in a sense vindicated, because my nose was, was enough to tell
But,
me that something doesn't smell good about this guy. Something is very fishy here. So in a sense, I feel vindicated. I mean, what kind of person decides to present themselves taking bath in during winter in a mountain lake? I mean, I told you this is beyond ridiculous. And to tell me what? That you are some sort of guru, some sort of. And of course, there were jokes and memes, because we had George Constanza, Seinfeld, the shrinkage factor, and all that. And the internet was full of memes, because this is so ridiculous. And even
but
him now, you present yourself as being independent and sovereign and so on and so forth, and you don't dare to oppose Israeli politicians.
But then I have to ask this question. Very quickly before I ask about 2% of of GDP. But very quickly, Colin Georgescu, is he? What is his current status? Because I believe he said that they found nothing dodgy
They
about him.
found nothing. They found nothing. So they
So, so,
basically
so, but-
found
so, so,
nothing.
so is he part of the coalition government? Is he president of Romania? Or
No, 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 because he didn't enter parliament. His party did, but he was banned from running. So nothing happened. And in terms of political, capital, I also think he was also eroded. But it was a huge slap on the face of Romanians, because it was just another abuse in a very long line of abuses that the Romanian people suffered. I mean, we have like 5 to 6 million Romanians who went away to work in the western part of Europe, doing menial jobs. And this creates like an open wound in a society, even though it is presented in very triumphalist terms, saying that, oh, finally Romanians are getting civilized by the Western Europeans. I mean, give me a break.
well,
Because,
perfect segue. perfect segue then to this question, which is, I don't think the anti-war movement makes this case enough. Maybe it's because maybe it's because simply aren't invited to corporate media and to Western state media outlets, from PBS to BBC to Radio Free, whatever. But I just find it, but I think we really have to talk to people about what spending just 2% of GDP can do for for a country. For a country, we could easily make the socialist case. And I was so when we talk about Romania spending 2% to 5% of its GDP on NATO. Can you talk about how if Romania just spent 2% of its GDP, uh, not on NATO, not on militarism, Romania would be able to eradicate Roma poverty. It would be able to merge mental health care into a single payer healthcare system. You could give teachers a living wage. You can introduce programs like pharmacare. And not that I'm pro police, but you could even give police officers the resources they need to address high crime and get criminals, because you once told me
Look, the
that
problem is the following. The
yeah.
problem is the following. Even though people are well aware of the fact that you don't need to increase the budget of the Romanian intelligence service, okay? You don't need to increase the budget of the military. You don't need to spend that much because you could do a lot more with that money. There is this fear mongering and war mongering in society, and people are afraid, of the big bad wolf that is Russia. And until and unless the Romanian people wakes up and understands that we have to play our cards well, and we have to look after ourselves by being a source of diplomacy, a source of intelligent geopolitical thinking, and making ourselves valuable to others through other means. Until and unless this happens, this fear mongering is going to work. And people are going to believe that, oh, it is okay now to make all these sacrifices because there is this big bad wolf, Vladimir Putin and Russia at our border, and they are going to come and eat us alive. But people are starting to wake up because Romania is a conservative country. It's a conservative country, and most of the Romanian population is Orthodox. I told you that all these ideas with queer liberation and so on and so forth, it doesn't fly in Romania. I mean, we are one of the most seriously Christian, if you like, countries, in the sense that 65% of Romanians declare that they are practicing Orthodoxy. So this is a lot. I don't say it's a bad or a good thing, but this is the situation in Romania. And so making people afraid that another Orthodox country is going to come here and that they are conservatives and are going to slash gay rights, I don't think it works. But I mean,
well,
because it doesn't work. It works for the small minority, in the elite centers, the urban areas, but for rural population, and let me tell you that Romania still has 40% of its population living in rural areas.
well, I
So
was
we were one of the
well,
countries in Romania that was, most backwards in terms of how many people lived, because in 1945 it was 75% of the population living in rural areas. So it was a rural country
well,
and with a backward. But you know what I wanted to say? What I think it's even more important than that is that now Romanians are only fed this idea that we have to make whatever sacrifice because we have to protect ourselves. The idea that investment can only come from the West, the idea that the security can only come from the West, until and unless we open up for negotiations, discussions, as Canada did with China, until and unless we do that, there's no way for us to move forward, because unfortunately the United States and the West can only invest in wars and military equipment. So we have to understand this is a reality. It's not that I am pro the authoritarian regimes in East, but you have to be pragmatic. I mean, Romanians and especially this minority of intellectuals who are very vocal are always, and also the leadership of the European Union. If you look at Kaja Kallas, if you look at Ursula von der Leyen and other important leaders, they always act like they have to marry, these leaders from the East. So if they are buying oil from Russia, it is like they have to, I don't know, go to dinner with Vladimir Putin,
Well,
No, you don't have to. I mean, they don't have this idea that you don't have to be in total agreement with these people. You don't have to condone them. But international relations, and this is the world we live in, it's a very diverse place. It's very diverse. Not everybody is a feminist and a progressive thinker like you. Not everybody is pro-democracy. But still, you have to live with these people. You cannot say that you climbed on this very high moral ground and then you starve yourself to death, and your population because you don't deal with these people. Let me tell you that the United States just decided to lift the sanctions for Russian oil. It was on New York Times this morning. So apparently we climbed on the moral ceiling of humanity, decided that we don't deal with Russia and we don't buy oil from Russia. But now, apparently, since the Straits of Hormuz are closed, we are starting to buy oil from. Now, how hypocritical and silly is that? And
well,
I
that's a
think even Romanians are starting to see through this. The problem is, I told you that we have a very vocal minority that is very pro-EU, pro-Brussels, pro-NATO, pro-whatever, and a large majority that is silent and unrepresented.
But that's a perfect segue to this second to last question of mine, which is this: in your own critical leftist perspective, I gotta ask, what is your assessment of the current ruling Christian Democratic German coalition government led by Friedrich Merz, Donald Tusk ruling Poland, and the EU as it is currently led by Ursula von der Leyen, and NATO led by former Dutch progressive conservative right-wing Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Also, the head of the UN General Assembly is the German Green former Foreign Affairs Minister Annalena Baerbock. What's your assessment of EU and the NATO as it currently is? And then my follow-up question to that is, if a referendum were held in Romania and across Eastern Europe, would you support divorcing the EU, or only if the left was really strong? And until such a day comes, are you still going to be an EU left reformist
Well,
like Yanis Varoufakis? And I ask this because the EU, as it currently is right now, is a demonstrable organization which supports the criminal war in Iran, led by Israel and the U.S. It supports the kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro. Not only is the EU not stopping Israel's mass slaughter in historic Palestine, but it more or less supports Israel's mass murder of Lebanese, Syrians, and Sudanese. So yeah, your response to all of that before I ask my very last question.
well, I think if you really love the EU, you have to divorce not the EU, but its leadership. I mean, all these people you mentioned are very good at holding on to power, but let me tell you that I think their days have to be numbered, and I think I'll champagne myself when they are gone, because they are the biggest enemies of the European Union. I mean, through their policies, through their visions, through their actions or inactions, they managed to transform even EU, enthusiasts such as myself as in people that are looking with growing concern on at what's going on. Because this type of double standards, I mean, where is Slava Irani? Okay, we had Slava Ukraini. Where is Slava Irani? I mean, and it's so obvious for a lot of people. And unfortunately, I will tell you what the situation in Romania is. And it's so sad because, for better or for worse, the European Union, for universities, major cities in Romania, it meant a democratic, pluralistic, and progressive project. In terms of gay rights, women's rights, tolerance, pluralism, all the rest, multiculturalism, respect for the other. And I think that's a huge step because, in terms of mentality, humanity progresses the slowest. You may have all sorts of progress in economy and finances in technology, but the mentality always lags a little bit behind, and this is a historical proven fact. You don't have to own a PhD in anthropology or political science to see that. Okay, the problem is that you have these good things, okay, the box with good things, okay, that the European Union did, but then you have this horrible double standards, supporting the genocide, supporting the war against Iran, this pathological Russophobia, okay, that is the only project that unites currently this leadership that you mentioned. And this is the box with horrible things. Now, the problem is that Romanians, when they are going to reject the European Union, they will reject legitimately the box with horrible things, but also the box with good things. This is my biggest fear and the saddest part, because I told you, there were important progress was made, especially even though it was formal, it was theatrical, it was performative, and so on and so forth. It was progress, okay? Especially even though it was for the elites, maybe it was only in urban centers and so on and so forth. It was important. Now it will be gone. And unfortunately, because the European Union managed to combine these very progressive elements with attitudes that are despicable. I mean, you can support gay rights all you want if you support the genocide, if you support war crimes in Gaza, if you support an illegal, immoral, and unjust war against Iran, and if you don't react, for instance, when American politicians speak about a war against the nation of Iran, I mean, this is, to be condemned by the European Union, and the European Union also should think of itself as a provider of, experience, intelligence, democracy, because we have such long experience with wars, but also with peace treaties, with collaboration. And instead of, reviving the OSCE, the Organization for Cooperation and Security in Europe, instead of reviving this, and instead of providing a platform for dialogue, for peace, for negotiation, because we decide to do what? To rearm, to become this tiger. It's ridiculous, because the industrial capacities, you have to have what? Mines, you have to have all sorts of resources, the capacity to exploit those resources, to provide the materials, to build the planes, to build the tanks, to build everything. And this may take years. So why not use all that money to provide the world with a platform for dialogue and peace? But for that, you need a little bit of independence and independent thinking. And I am under the impression that Mr. Rutte is a manager, a CEO that wants to keep his job.
Yeah.
Okay. Miss Annalena Baerbock, I mean, she turns radically 360 degrees, and this tells you everything you need to know about her. Then you have who? Kaya Kallas, who is pathologically Russophobic. She's not diplomat. You cannot be a diplomat when you're pathologically Russophobic. Then you have who? Ursula von der Leyen, who said that Russians no longer have chips and they are stealing chips from washing machines to put the chips in missiles. This is what she said publicly, okay? Then you have this ex-banker, Mr. Merz. I think if Mr. Merz were to govern like 10 years ago, it would have been interesting because he's very skillful in terms of money due to the fact that he was a banker working for BlackRock. But now he's way over his head. He's way. But you know the hypocrisy here. He went to China, but if Romania were to decide to go to China and establish relations with the world's powerhouse right now, oh, that would be a major, treasonous action. And this is it. I mean, I think these people are the biggest enemies of the European Union, and they are going to sink it if they continue. If
Then,
we want to
well,
stand a
then,
chance, these people have to go.
then before I ask my last question, then I do have to ask this important follow up question, which which is the following. Now I've recently been doing more and more research into the European Union, liberal democracy, and how the European Union explicitly promotes itself. When you really do go into the nitty gritty, it really explicitly promotes itself as as liberal democracy and neoliberalism and so forth. And if you are a leftist, you cannot support a project like that. Now, but that being said, if your choices are the European Union and all the crazy far right alternatives of leaving a European Union, this is where like I'm a reluctant Yanis Varoufakis EU left reformist, which is like, okay, hold my nose. I effing hate the European Union, but I definitely do not want the Nigel Farages of the world, as an alternative. So, in the future, do we just reluctantly support the European Union because there just is not a strong left that's ready to, take power should referendums be held across
Well, I think
Europe and so forth?
the future, as I see it, is the following. We either start cooperating with China or we go bankrupt. This is
Okay.
as easy as that because you have to solve the problem not politically but economically if you want a leftist analysis. So you have to have investment, you have to have cooperation, you have to have the Chinese coming here and making investments and starting cooperations with them, because if you don't allow for a cooperation with the power that can actually provide also an alternative model of development, not just weapons and wars and destruction, then you're doomed to fail. It is as easy as that.
Well,
And
then,
I think the Canadians understood it, I think Mr. Orban in Hungary understands that. He's now in a major confrontation with Vladimir Zelensky. And I think it's very important for us, for Romanians and for the European Union to understand that we either adapt to the current situation of the world or we go bankrupt and we become irrelevant. And now you see the final thing, and now I have to go. The final thought. I mean, in 2022, when the war broke and Russia invaded Ukraine, we had this narrative. Hold on. The Russia's gonna collapse. Vladimir Putin has like 3 weeks to live because he has cancer. Uh, there are no more weapons in Russia. Don't worry, they are going to collapse. Ukraine is winning the war. Let us remember, for years we heard that Ukraine is winning the war. Ukraine is winning the war. Ukraine is winning. Okay. Now what do we hear? Hold on. There's gonna be a regime change in Iran. Just hold on, just a little bit longer. I mean, 2022, we heard all this. Now, 4 years later, we saw how much of that is true. Do we have to wait another 4 years before we can see how much this narrative, how disconnected from reality is that we are going to have just now in 5 minutes, regime change in Iran. I'm just wondering. And I told you, for me, the
But
question
are
is
you?
simple. The
But
idea is simple.
but
We either allow collaboration with China and we open ourselves to collaboration with China and investment, or we go bankrupt.
well, but in that said, but in that said, finalement question is: are you surprised that Russia hasn't ended its military operations? Are you surprised the
No,
West doesn't just go
I
full
was not surprised.
hot war and
I'm
send
surprised
troops
at
on
our
the ground and
leadership.
push Russia back in its orders? And what do you think a just peace even looks like in Ukraine? And I don't have to tell you, that even when you try to have an honest, rational conversation with people, and you say to them, "Look, I don't support Russia's military actions in Ukraine, but all of this stuff started when we overthrew a Ukrainian, democratically elected Ukrainian government. We supported the most reactionary movements in Ukraine that were attacking a largely Russian-speaking province in Donbass." Still, when you mention that, people still look at you as if you're speaking Japanese, or if you just spat in their face.
They will come to their senses. Let me tell you that a lot of people came to their senses, and there is this small minority, and unfortunately, intellectuals in Romania. It is as if they have this mental disease, Russophobia, and this paranoia. But I think a lot of people will come to their senses because, you know, it doesn't surprise me what Russia did. It didn't surprise me at all that they are winning and now they have 20% of Ukraine. Honestly, what surprises me is that if me, I'm an ordinary person living in a small village in Romania, if I was able to see that, how is it that our elites were so disconnected from reality that they ate their own soup? They sold and they bought their own soup, and they drowned themselves in their own propaganda and lies, and they weren't able to see it. It was so obvious. And it is not like you say, Russia is bigger than Ukraine. It is like you say, nine is bigger than five. And you don't say that because you are ninophilic and five-phobic, okay? You are just
Well, I
stating a
I
reality
think
and
go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm shocked that our elites were so stupid that they weren't able. And now with Iran, I mean, you have these commentators online, you have people that conduct serious military analysis, and I often watch them at enormous personal discomfort because they are reactionary right wingers. But then you have to look and you have to have a clear assessment and to have a rational assessment of the situation. You have to listen to what they have to say, because for the past 4 years they were right in what they were saying. So if in the past they were right, maybe there is a high chance that they are right also about what they're saying about Iran, and you should form an opinion. But now, no, these people are completely disconnected from reality, and I think we are doomed unless these people go.
I completely agree with you, and I'll just say, here's hoping cooler heads prevail. And as somebody I really don't like to talk about Ukraine because it's become such a toxic subject. A friend of mine who is Ukrainian, who is from Kharkiv, she has lost family members to this horrible war. And but if you try to show people, you remember I once showed a documentary a French documentarian did on what the Western-backed Ukrainians were doing to Donbass, and for me, I just find if we do not acknowledge that, then there is then we really can't have a conversation about how
But
about
we will, because the military situation in Ukraine is going to impose, and these people are going to sober up at some point. And just like we saw with the war in Vietnam and other major conflicts where there were, people were fed enormous amounts of propaganda. I think this propaganda is wearing thin. And what Donald Trump did, and especially the Epstein files, contributed a lot to the erosion of the image of the United States and what they are doing. And I think people are way less inclined to take the United States for granted after the Epstein files. So the Epstein files, I think, are very, very important because I think they eroded the image of the ruling class in the United States to such a degree that people are not willing to buy into the propaganda as they used to.
in, interesting
So,
oh, very interesting. Well, I think I think that's a very good place to end.
yes, I
Folks,
have to go.
exactly. So, folks, well, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One, our All Things Romania edition, Eastern European edition, with our returning champion, Dr. Maria Cernat. Again, she's an academic who specializes in media studies, ethics in media. She's an editor and host of Pacifica Barricada. She's a member of the Romanian chapter.
Pacifist barricade.
Pac-
Pacifist barricade.
Okay, Pacifist Barricade. I'll remember that. And she's a member of the Romanian chapter of World Beyond War. And again, she teaches journalism, media studies, and she's a media critics instructor at Tita Maesc in Romania. Maria, all my best. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to having you back on. And again, folks, please donate generously to One Plus One. If you prefer to donate in another way, I ask people to donate to PayPal, but if they prefer a different means of donating, then contact me at yurismauder@gmail.com. Until then, Maria, again, thank you so much for coming on the program. All my best to you, and good luck advancing the peace movements in Romania.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Bye.